September 18th, 1944. Chobham, England. A captured German Panther tank sat silent inside the School of Tank Technology. Its steel hull, once feared across Europe, now glinted cold and motionless under harsh workshop lights. The scent of oil and burnt rubber hung heavy, and British engineers moved slowly among scattered tools, their coveralls stained from hours of labour. Among them, Dr. Alan Whitmore, metallurgist from Vickers Armstrong, studied the tank, summoned by the War Office to answer a single question. Why did Germany's most advanced tank keep dying on its own? The Panther had been designed as the successor to the Panzer IV machine, combining speed, armour and firepower into what Hitler called the perfect tank. Its 75mm high-velocity gun could pierce Allied armour over a kilometre. Its sloped front plate could deflect almost anything the British or Americans fired. And yet, reports from the front were astonishing. For every Panther destroyed by combat, 2 more were abandoned because of mechanical failure. Gearboxes shattered, final drives were seized, entire battalions left their tanks intact but immobile. Whitmore ran a hand across a fractured final drive casing. The damage wasn't from battle, it came from within. A year earlier, he had dissected a Tiger transmission, seeing gears too hard, steel too brittle. Now, the Panther seemed to share the same fate. He signaled the crane to lift the final drive assembly onto the bench. Inside, the gears looked surgical in precision, finely machined teeth, polished steel surfaces, and perfect symmetry. Yet one had sheared clean through the middle, smooth and crystalline, without any bending. "This isn't worn," he whispered. "It's failure." The young technician beside him frowned. "But sir, these gears are massive. How could they just snap?" Whitmore didn't answer. His mind traced hardness values, heat treatment curves, and the absence of nickel and molybdenum in German steel since mid-1944. Germany's post-1943 tanks carried not just armour, but the fatigue of a nation running out of resources, time, and skilled labour. "We'll need samples from the gear teeth and the core," he said. "Prepare for Rockwell testing." Outside, rain pattered over Chobham's fields, blending with the rhythmic tapping of chisels. Whitmore held the broken gear, a message written in steel, a story of perfection turned against itself. The Panther had been meant as the embodiment of German engineering genius, but under pressure, brilliance became fragility. Strength without resilience, hardness without toughness. The same paradox that had doomed the Tiger was repeating itself. Placed beside a half-disassembled Churchill gearbox, Whitmore noted, 2 machines from opposite sides of the war zone, obsessed with complexity, the other with endurance. His final note: "Victory belongs not to the strongest metal, but to the one that bends before it breaks." Over the following days, the workshop at Chobham became a laboratory and crime scene in one. Every surface holds steel fragments, hardness charts, and microscope images. Whitmore studied cross-sections of gear teeth at 500x magnification. The surface gleamed with Martensitterazor sharp, deadly brittle. Beneath lay tempered steel, faint and ductile, but barely present. These gears had been quenched too fast, tempering skipped, alloying elements replaced by emergency substitutes. Hardness readings confirmed the truth. 63 HRC, too high. The gears were glass shells around a softer core, doomed to explode under shock. Captured German documents confirmed the systemic cause: shortages of nickel and molybdenum, furnace failures, semi-trained labour, and constant bombing raids forced production shortcuts. Every fractured gear was a time bomb. Whitmore whispered, "It's not bad engineering. It's desperation disguised as perfection." Back in the field, Panther crews experienced this firsthand. Normandy, August 1944. Columns of Panther tanks advanced, engines roaring, gears shrieking. Lieutenant Hans Kruger felt the drive seized. A sharp crack. The tank stopped. Other Panthers swerved, then faltered in the same way. From the air, Allied pilots thought it was a victory, but the destruction had already happened within the metal. Field reports showed 43% of Panthers unserviceable after less than 150 kilometers. Their final drives failed, engines intact. Hitler's orders to reinforce the machines only added weight, increasing torque and accelerating failure. By late 1944, Panther divisions were crippled by their own design. Whitmore's research transformed Allied tactics. His report detailed the Panther's Achilles heel, brittle final drives. British commanders, including Major General Percy Hobart, taught crews to force the tanks to move aggressively, pivot sharply, and accelerate under stress. The greater the torque, the higher the chance of failure. Smoke shells, flanking maneuvers, and calculated provocations let Panther tanks destroy themselves without a single shot fired. By early 1945, Panther battalions were immobilized in the Ardennes, abandoned, engines running, final drives seized, destroyed, not by bullets, but by physics. The war ended in May 1945. Across Europe, tanks lay frozen in place, monuments to brilliance undone by ambition. Whitmore's analysis became part of post-war design standards. The lessons informed the Centurion and Chieftain tanks: precision without haste, tempered steel within limits, case depth controlled. Whitmore's law emerged: strength means nothing without resilience. Years later, at the Tank Museum in Bevington, Whitmore visited a restored Panther. Its paint immaculate, turret polished, but he knew the truth of the lower hull, the final drives inside. A small, fractured gear rested nearby, labeled Panther G, recovered 1,944. Structural failure due to improper tempering. A piece of metal that outlasted empires, teaching engineers quiet lesson: perfection rushed is fatal. Strength must yield, brilliance must respect its limits. Knowledge, patience, and understanding matter more than firepower. Even today, the Panther stands as a symbol not of German failure, but of what happens when ambition exceeds material limits. Whitmore's legacy endures: every reliable machine, every transmission that survives stress, every gear that flexes and endures. His simple truth: a perfect design is not the one that never fails. It's the one that fails safely. By late 1944, Panther crews faced a harsh reality. Their tanks were masterpieces of engineering and ticking time bombs. Engines purred, guns tracked targets, but beneath, the final drives were brittle, ready to fail at the slightest torque. Across Normandy and the Ardennes, tanks stalled mid-advance. Crews abandoned them in frustration. Battles were lost not to Allied fire, but to the steel itself. In Chobham, Whitmore's analysis revealed the secret: over-hardened gears, rushed production, and substitute metals. A perfectly machined tooth could snap like glass. Field reports confirmed nearly half of the Panthers failed before seeing proper combat. Precision had turned lethal. August 1944. Panther columns crawled through Normandy's burning fields. Lieutenant Hans Kruger shouted over grinding gears, "Something's wrong with the drive!" The tank shuddered violently, then halted. A sharp crack echoed inside the right track locked. Around them, half the column faltered, immobilized by their own machinery. Allied pilots strafed, but the true enemy had already struck physics. Back in Chobham, Whitmore examined the fractured gears again. Each tooth tells the same story: 63 Rockwell hardness, no tempering, brittle martensite layers surrounding a soft core. The war had forced speed over precision. Germany's finest tanks were defeated from within, victims of desperation disguised as engineering brilliance. September 1944. Back in England, Chobham's workshop hummed with quiet urgency. Whitmore and his team had dissected every component of the Panther's final drive. Magnified fractures glimmered like broken crystal, each one with a silent confession of over-hardened steel and skipped tempering. Surface hardness readings of 63 HRC were far beyond safe limits. The Panther's strength was its undoing. British intelligence absorbed Whitmore's findings. Officers studied the brittle final drives, realizing the tanks could be forced to fail without a single shell fired. The principle was simple yet devastating: to provoke movement, strain the transmission, and let physics do the rest. Sharp turns, sudden stops, rapid acceleration, any abrupt maneuver could shatter the gears from within. By October, these insights were integrated into Allied tactics. Cromwell and Sherman crews learned to attack from multiple angles, force Panthers to pivot repeatedly, and watch them collapse under their own mechanical weight. Skirmishes in Normandy confirmed the strategy. Panthers stalled, engines running, tracks jammed. Crews bailed out, thinking they'd been hit. Entire tanks immobilized, captured intact, proving Whitmore's theory in the field. Whitmore watched reports with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. His quiet laboratory work, once just steel and microscopes, was now shaping the battlefield. Knowledge has become a weapon. The Allies were not just firing at the Germans, they were letting the Germans destroy themselves. The lesson was clear. Brilliance without resilience is fragile, and even the most advanced machines are vulnerable to their own perfection. Late 1944. The Ardennes, heavy with snow and mud, became a proving ground for Whitmore's discoveries. German Panther columns advanced cautiously, engines roaring and gears shrieking under the weight of their own design. Half the tanks were already limping before the first Allied shot. Inside one Panther, the crew struggled as the right track. Locked, gears fractured, oil spattered. The tank froze mid-maneuver, its power betrayed from within. Allied reconnaissance noticed the pattern. Panthers weren't always falling by fire, they were collapsing under stress, victims of over-hardened steel and skipped tempering. British and American crews adapted instinctively, attacking from multiple angles, forcing the tanks to pivot on frozen, uneven terrain. The heavier the maneuver, the faster the gears shattered. Engines hummed, tracks jammed, and tanks stalled, abandoned intact. Field reports described it plainly. Mechanical failure, no projectile damage. Whitmore's findings had become a strategy. Laboratory observations of fractured gears and martensite surfaces were now alive on the battlefield. The Panther, meant to be Germany's ultimate armored weapon, was succumbing to physics itself. In quiet moments, he imagined the German engineers, once his colleagues, witnessing their own creations fail, powerless to intervene. His work demonstrated that knowledge, patience, and observation could shape war without a single bullet fired. Early 1945, Allied commanders, armed with Whitmore's insights, refined their tactics. Panthers no longer need to be hit to neutralize. Crews spread out, attacked from multiple angles, or fired smoke to obscure vision, forcing the German tanks to pivot repeatedly. Each sharp turn strained the over-hardened final drives, and one by one, gears fractured. Engines roared while tracks jammed. Tanks froze mid-maneuver. Crews abandoned them, bewildered but unharmed. Reports confirmed the pattern. 9 Panthers engaged near the Ruhr River, 4 disabled mechanically before a single shot struck. The invisible battlefield inside the gearbox had become a strategic weapon. Whitmore's lab observations of brittle martensite, skipped tempering, and excessive case depth now dictated real-world outcomes. The Panther's brilliance was undone by physics and haste, and Allied forces leveraged this knowledge with precision. Whitmore, watching reports from London, realized his quiet laboratory work had changed the battlefield strategy. Science, meticulous observation, and understanding material limits had achieved what firepower alone could not. The message was clear: perfection without resilience was a liability, and the finest machines could be defeated without a single projectile fired.